Hi guys, it's David Eklund, davideklund.com, and welcome to Resilient Legacy Expat Dad Coaching. It's been a while since I've made a video, and so I'm just going to riff a little bit and talk to you guys about what's been on my mind. I just need to get back into the flow of making these videos and staying connected. I know some of you have been getting a lot out of it, out of these videos that I make, and I've been asking for more, so here I am. And I want to talk a little bit about this whole phenomenon of having an identity crisis. So this is some of the deepest stuff you can ever go through, and we all go through it. That's amazing. That in and of itself is kind of an amazing fact. For example, going from being a boy to being an adolescent to being a man, you couldn't explain to a boy what a man is. A boy can't understand what that would mean. You there's no way to transmit that knowledge other than actually the experience of becoming a man. So, but that's more general, and then there's specific things like becoming an expat is a transformation. You're entering into a new culture, and not just on a temporary basis where you're just visiting for a few weeks or something, a few days, but certainly months and probably years, if not permanently. And who you are, who you feel yourself to be, how you stand in the world, how others perceive you, how you perceive yourself, that all goes through a monumental shift. And it can take people by surprise. And even if you've been there for a while, I've lived in Germany a total of about 7 years now, but in two different times, 3 years before, 4 years now. There's another wave. There's another wave of really settling in. I think it's actually even more difficult now because of being able to live online to the extent that we do, or having to live online if your work is with people who aren't physically present. If you're working in a language that is not the language of where you're now living, then there are actually extra hurdles. Even though it's easier to make the move, it's harder to settle. It's harder to actually fully commit. Like, this is who I am. I belong here, and this place belongs in me in a way. If that makes sense. And that's, I'm sure some of you, if you've been living in your expat, in your country of choice for longer than I have, you know what I'm talking about. You've thoroughly gone through this phase, and I'd be very interested in hearing what you have to say and sharing your wisdom with the rest of us in the Expat Dad Mastermind. For those of you that have gone through the Relationship Renaissance course, or have been direct clients of mine, one-on-one clients, or have participated in any of my courses, you're certainly welcome to join the Expat Dad Mastermind and share your wisdom. And in any case, you can always email me. You see the contact form on the website. That's the easiest way. Anyway, always interested in hearing from you guys. So what's the transition I'm going through? Well, basically, although being an expat dad is a big part of who I am, being a father certainly is a huge part. I take that. I love being a father. I love the challenges. I love my boys. I love, it's a dream of mine that's being fulfilled. And every day I look at my boys, I'm like, wow, you guys are just beautiful. You're strong. You're capable. You're just, it's exciting to see them. And so that it's a big part of my life. But there's other parts too. There's, my more philosophical inclinations, my more spiritual inclinations, my views on current events, which can be quite spicy. If you guys want to have an interesting conversation, I'd love that too. Particularly around the nature of what it is to be free, inwardly, outwardly. I certainly have a lot of libertarian leanings, though libertarianism isn't a full-on philosophy of life. It has a lot of good things to say about, the non-aggression principle and, just the value of freedom, the value of self-determination, the value of, now speaking from a spiritual perspective, what it might mean to be a child of God, to have that inner authority to create your life as you see fit, which has a lot to do with the whole, what anyone who's looking at coaching must somewhere in them sign up for, that they actually have some authority in their life to create it as they see fit. They have some agency, they have free will, they have, true creativity. And which is not to deny that we, that our backgrounds and makeup has some influence, but that's the paints. And then how you paint them on the canvas, that's, we can grow ever more capable of ever greater amounts of freedom in what we create in our lives. And coaching is a facilitates that. Facilitates growing in that competency. So anyway, so a couple things. So like I say, being a father, a big part of my life, being an expat, having this experience of stepping into a new culture, fully embracing that, it's a big part of my life. But then there's these other parts. There's, and how do I actually bring that to bear in my coaching and in my presence and really being authentic, because if I try to leave them out because, hey, I don't want to offend anybody or I don't want to exclude anybody and all this, I'm actually not going to connect with anybody and you're not going to feel that I'm being real with you. So I'm going to, basically, I'm just going to step in and share as authentically as possible, in a way or about things that actually can provide value to you. Okay. As in my best judgment. So, and then, so you can also see, are we a match? Because, if, you're constantly, bumping into turns of phrase that you don't like, or if I share about my Christian belief, I have an unconventional Christian belief, you could say, but certainly Christ is the center of my world. And to whatever extent he's not, I'm working on it. So, you don't have to believe what I believe, but if you have a problem with me believing that, then, have a nice life. Thanks for stopping by. So I just want to be real. So, I have, I have friends that absolutely do not believe what I believe, and we can still be friends. That's fine. And, so that's, I just want to be clear about where I'm coming from. So, and then the thing is, I think if you go deep enough into anyone's worldview, belief system, theology, if you go deep enough so that it transcends the ideological, it transcends the rational, then you're going to get something in common. I'm not saying that all religions are the same. I don't believe that. But if you go to the highest possible quality of whatever ideology or worldview that you're looking at, if you go to the, what is, just to take an extreme example, like the best possible communist. Let's say I'm not a communist, but let's say, you can imagine that if you let yourself, like, what would the best possible communist look like, right? And you probably know, like, what's the best, far left person. And, for me, it would be someone who's like let's say a pacifist who actually like goes into war zones, and he's a profound Christian, and he works to reconcile people, does peace work, and is able to hear different points of view, and he wants to bring a commonality. So this communism isn't skin deep and isn't, full of resentment. It's actually full of tremendous love. And just because he doesn't understand economics doesn't mean it doesn't have something really valuable to say, because the ideology isn't the point for him. He's actually living out of a deeper value. Okay, and that value that he has, I admire. Does that make sense? So I can actually say, wow, you have transcended me in that particular value, and that's the point for you. And calling yourself a communist is just a reflection of you prioritizing that value the highest, that value of brotherhood, that value of if if any one person isn't happy, then nobody's happy, which is, I think, where we're going to go in the future. That's like, so that's the silver lining, or the shred of truth that's in something like communism is actually, for me, a Christian impulse. That we take care of each other, and there's even something in the Gospels and then the New Testament that talks about sharing all things in common. And so I think that there's something to that, but of course that doesn't have to come through a, a hulking state apparatus full of the tyranny of no one. I forget who said that, but it's a beautiful phrase. The tyranny of no one is the definition of bureaucracy. So even something like that, like, I'm absolutely an anti-communist, but I can see what would be the best possible version of that, and also different religious views and so on that I'm have a problem with. As a Christian, I just have a different view. If someone says Christ isn't the savior, well, I disagree profoundly. But hey, what's the best possible version of that? What is it that they're bringing to the table? And those values that transcend the mind, can I connect with them on that level? Okay, so you can sort of see my dilemma. If I'm thinking about things in this way, what the heck does this have to do with being an expat dad, right? How do I present myself as a coach? So there's an identity conflict. There's an identity crisis in that, right? Potentially. I mean, I think you can follow what I mean. Like, I don't fit into this suit. But the thing is, I was just wearing it too tight, right? I think that's so many of the problems in the world today. Like, that's one of the things I love about Russian culture, for example. Like, I'm a pretty sensitive guy, but I also like strangling other guys, like BJJ and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That is martial arts in general. Like, I love that intense confrontation on a physical level. I never got really into team sports, but wrestling, gymnastics, martial arts, juggling. Yeah, there's a lot of, running, just that individual or one against one sport I've always been into. So, I'm totally fine with being a hyper masculine barbarian, having that part of my life. But I'm also like an exceptionally emotional man that, and as a coach, that's extremely valuable. As long as I have a backbone while the tears are rolling out. I mean, if you see videos of Tony Robbins, he's a great example of this too. He's like 2 meters tall, this huge hulking guy, and he's just like, he cries all the time, but he never stops thinking. The emotions never turn off the brain, right? So that's the key thing, is like, you can have all that that deep feeling, but you still have your goal. You're still pushing through to whatever's most important to you. That core masculinity, that drive, that directedness, intentionality, you could say, as like maybe the spiritual version of masculinity. Anyway, what the heck am I talking about? So yeah, as an expat dad, you could be going through other kinds of identity crises, because you have an intention of where you're going in life. You show up there, and then of course you couldn't anticipate all the details. You couldn't anticipate who you'd need to be in that situation, and then you have to grow into actually what that situation calls out of you, but you don't have the concept yet. And so your concept of who you were going to be starts falling apart, and then who you actually are becoming is a perception at first without a concept. And to get clear on that, I'm having a perception of who I am that I don't understand yet. And to live in that like existential angst, basically, in an enduring way over a longer period of time, that is a true sign of maturity. If you can walk through that with a state of inner peace, holding that all up, holding yourself through that process. In anthroposophy, which is the more particular form of Christianity that I subscribe to, let's say, it's a form of esoteric Christianity. There's this teaching of in the ancient mysteries, you had in Egypt, let's say, you had a hierophant who watched over the body of the initiate, of the initiand, of the person who's going through initiation, as they, for 3 days, were basically unconscious, near death, and had their great initiation experience. Maybe they had some kind of elixir that they took, and then that kicked them out of their bodies, and they went and zoomed around the spiritual world. And then but they needed someone to watch over the body, keep the body safe. So that's the hierophant. And in anthroposophy, there's this idea that we watch over our own body, let's say, at least using it as a metaphor or an analogy. We have to be our own hierophant. We have to give that structure while we're doing this spiritual journey. We're not going to do the division of labor of the person who's on the journey and the person who's holding the space, right? We have to do that as individuals, and that is how freedom is possible, inner freedom, if that makes sense. So again, as you're going through this transition where everything's dissolving and you're having, speaking of an identity crisis, the boundaries of who you are dissolving, and you're having a new experience of who you're becoming, because you're in a different place, in a profound sort of all-encompassing sense, in a holistic sense. A different culture, a different worldview is actually a different filter of what it is to be human, right? So, and as you're going through that new filter and your old filter's falling away, and you're having a new experience of what it is to be yourself, then to also be that hierophant who's holding the space and saying, I got it. Like, I got me. Yeah. And this is, I think, a very useful and masculine way of putting what it means to love yourself. This whole idea of self-love, which feels so cringe to a lot of us, it's to hold that space for that inner journey. Like, I'm like, things are falling apart, and I'm, the barbarian in me is freaking out and feeling like, oh, am I supposed to kill something? And it's like, no, stand. Like Braveheart, when the cavalry are charging in and they're about to lift up those spears. Hold. Have a backbone while you're breathing. That makes sense. So I hope you got something out of this. I'm going to speak a lot more in this kind of format in the future. And as I'm getting ready to actually launch a new podcast, the name of which I'm not totally certain of, but anyway, love to hear your feedback. Please, if you email me, I will email you back. I promise. I read every one and I email back. Love to hear from you guys. And just by the way, just so you know, I don't only coach expat dads. Okay, that's my main thing. That I think is where people can relate to me. But as you can see, like, there's a lot of people that would actually interested in what I have to say, and they can be ladies, they can be men who are becoming fathers, and they want to have some insight into how they should prepare themselves, for that crisis in identity. So if you're not an expat dad, but you like what I have to say, go ahead and contact me. It's okay. I would love to hear from you. And God bless. Take care.